All right, it is January 17th. This is Phil 334, Engineering Ethics at NJIT. I'm Dan Estrada. I'm the instructor for the semester. I'll be leading you through the class this semester. Hopefully you've already looked at the introduction video, maybe the grading policy video also. You've looked at the website a little bit. So normally at this time from 12 to 1, I will be having an online Hangout session. And the goal of these sessions is just to be sort of an open forum where we can have some conversation about the course material, if you have any questions about the material or about the assignments, if you want to chat about the topics. This hour and a half is supposed to be an open time where we can have something like a class discussion with your peers. There are 3 different classes that are all meeting at the same time. Each class has 60 students in it. They're all online classes. So that's potentially 180 students meeting at the same time. I doubt we'll get 180 students in class at the same time, but it's possible. Hopefully we have some interesting discussion among all of you. Because there's 3 different classes, you might not be in the same discussion section, so you might not actually be able to write in the forums to each other, but hopefully this conversation sort of spans all the classes. Normally, for a normal week, I will have a lecture online that's just me talking about the material. And then these online sessions will be mostly discussion-based, where I sort of open it up to the class and get your feedback on the material. Hopefully with me talking very little, maybe answering questions, but most of the discussion driven by you all. But since today's the first day of class, I wanted to do today with a little more rigorous of not a lecture really, but just an introduction to the class. Not really an introduction to the class policies. I have another video that's already online that goes through the syllabus and about the course structure. But this introductory lecture, I really want to be about what the content of the class is about and what my goals for running the class is. So I'll jump into that lecture in a little bit. Let me go ahead and go onto the web page just to make sure that you're oriented with where we are and what we're doing. Yeah, so here's the course website. There I am, okay. Yeah, so here's the course website, Moodle. I have 3 different sections. This is one of the sections. But here's the introduction video where I go over class policies and give a little brief introduction to the syllabus. Here's the grading policy, goes into more detail. Syllabus is here. Please read the syllabus. All your questions will be answered in the syllabus. Syllabus is like 15 pages long. I feel a little bit bad about that, except I don't have to print it out and you can read it at your leisure. So it's there online. I'm trying to make as many resources available for you as possible. And then here's lesson 1. Lesson 1 will always have these little red bars on the sides, so you know which lesson we're on. There's 15 lessons, so as the course goes on, you're gonna have to scroll down pretty far to get to the lesson that we're on. All 15 lessons are online right now. You can engage. At the bottom of every lesson, if you scroll down, there'll be a discussion section with forums you can write in. There'll be an attendance sheet where you can sign in with a secret word. Usually for lessons, there'll be a quiz. Not every lesson has a quiz, but most of the lessons have a quiz. Quizzes are usually short, multiple choice, or short paragraph response reading quizzes, just on the readings. So most of this should have been gone over in the other video. Let me stop here and see if there are any questions, any comments or concerns that anyone has. I did receive one email from someone saying, hey, look, there are required and optional readings in lesson 1, but I don't have my book yet. So that's true, but the required readings are the readings that are on a quiz, and there's no quiz for lesson 1. So you don't really need your book for lesson 1. There's a reading on lesson 1, but you're not going to be quizzed on it, so it's not absolutely essential that you get your book this week. If you have your book by next week, that should be fine. Next week's quiz will require something from the book, so make sure you pick up the textbook from the bookstore or from Amazon or wherever as soon as you can. If you have questions, just get on the mic or leave a question in chat. Someone just asked a question in chat. I watched the introduction video and didn't hear a secret word. There's no secret word for the introduction video. The secret word is for just the lectures. So there'll be a secret word today. In fact, the secret word is in the lesson that I'll be going through in a little bit. Is there any online code to access online resources? Or is just the book fine? The book and Moodle. Most of the class will be taking place on Moodle. Moodle is at moodle.njit.edu. So if you type in moodle.njit.edu, let me show you. You'll be taken to a page like this, and then you log on with your UCID. as you normally do. And then you'll be taken to a list of all the classes that you're registered for, and then the engineering ethics class will be one of those classes. So we're never meeting in person, not unless you want to. I will be here in my office. If you want to sit in my office while I'm having these lectures, you can do that. I have office hours right before this online hangout. So if you ever want to come by and chat with me in person, you're always welcome to do that. Usually I teach the online section in parallel with some real live class sections. And I always invite the online students to come sit in on a live class lecture. But this semester, I'm not teaching any live lectures for engineering ethics. So all the lectures will be in videos that I'll record and put online for each lesson. And then there'll be these online hangouts where we can talk online. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So about like the general like material of the course, is it going to are we going to be giving like tests and quizzes, or is it just based on like the quizzes and the responses that we give online?
Yeah, so I answered these questions in a lot more detail in the welcome video, but let me just show you from that welcome video. Oops.
Okay.
I have a little slide in the, Prezzi's been acting weird today. That's not working. Let me go into the syllabus instead. Yeah, I think that's a problem with Prezi. Not. I think it'll work at other times. Okay, so actually, the clearest presentation of this is right on the top of Moodle. So each lesson has a lecture, a reading quiz that's just on the readings for that lesson, and then a discussion forum where you have to write something about that lesson. That's all of the assignments. Every single week, you'll have to do that set of assignments. 15 weeks in the semester.
Okay.
The only exception to that is the research projects in weeks 10 and 11. There's a little bit of a difference, and I go over that in more detail later on. But apart from that reading quiz and post-discussion forum, there's no other assignments. So there's no midterm, there's no final, there's no other tests, there's no comprehension tests.
Right.
My teaching philosophy in this class is that the benefit you get out of it is the time that you put into it. So I give a lot of material, a lot of opportunities for you to read things that interest you, maybe do your own research on the topics. And the more time you spend doing that work, preparing your writing, responding to other people's writing, the more time you do that, the better you'll do in this course.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, good. So someone in chat asks, oh, you post video lectures, and apart from that, we meet here on Tuesdays. That's right. The video lectures will be posted hopefully a week in advance. I'm going to work on the second one this week. So hopefully they'll be posted in advance so you can watch the video lectures online. They'll be posted there all week, and in the video lecture will be the secret word. So the secret word will give you attendance credit. Actually, let me, I need to change something really quickly about, so one of the rules is that if you attend the online lecture like you all are doing now, you will get additional credit. So let me set that up right now. So there's a secret word for the lecture, and that's already in the, so let me try this. So I don't know if this is going to work exactly, but I'm going to try this. Try to take the quiz 1 with the secret word online. So the way that I'm going to try to do this is I'm going to have a separate secret word for the online hangout, and then a different secret word for the lecture. And if you do both of those, you'll get both credit. If you only do one of those, you only get 1 credit. The attendance credit for these things is entirely extra credit. It's entirely optional. So you're not required to be here on Tuesday during this time. You don't get marked down if you're not here. You also don't get marked down if you don't mark the attendance sheets. The attendance is only extra credit. It's just designed to encourage you to do another thing, spend some more time with the course. If you don't do it, you won't lose points, and you can do very well in the class without watching any of my videos or listening to my voice at all. But if you find it useful, then it's there to help you. I will say, and this is more clear in the grading policy, is that I'm something of a harsh grader. And I sort of counterbalance that by giving you lots of opportunities to make up extra credit, right? So all these attendance credits, and then there's a few more extra credit opportunities. So I grade somewhat harsh, and that pulls your grade down, but you can raise it by doing more work. Are you going to post the recorded Hangouts and lessons on Moodle? That's right. I will post them in the lesson. I'll just put another video in that lesson, and it'll be marked the online Hangout, so everyone can see all the questions that we're asking and answering right now. Good. If there are other questions as we go, just stop and say, hey, I have a question. Post in chat. I'm watching the chat.
Wait, so the secret word, are you going to give it to us at the end of this, or is it going to be posted online?
So the secret word for the online Hangout is online.
Okay.
So you should be able to take that attendance quiz. What's the secret word? Actually, I think I'm going to have to change this. I think I'm going to have to ask 2 different questions in the quiz. What's the secret word for the lecture and what's the secret word for the Hangout? Yeah, that's how I'm going to do it. Sorry, let me do this one. I'm sorry, I'm making edits to the class during class. It's always a good first day. What is the secret word? Add. People have already, okay, so people have already signed in the quiz. The people who've done that, I'm deleting your quiz right now, and you're gonna have to do it again. Sorry, because I'm changing the quiz. Okay, so don't take the quiz. Okay, so add a new question. Short answer. Online Hangout. Secret word. Okay. So this is online. That'll give you 100%. Okay. Okay. So now this is done. Okay, so now there are 2 questions in the quiz. One's the secret word for the lecture, and one's the secret word for the online Hangout. There'll be different words, and you will get attendance credit, attendance extra credit for answering these things. Again, you get the credit as long as you fill in this quiz by Friday. So if you don't have this time available normally during the week, that's fine. You can always go to the Moodle, watch the video at the times that you do have available, and get the attendance credit for the quiz. Good. Okay, that's all set up. Let's see, there's another question. So this is the Hangout. That's right. This is the Hangout. For the first Hangout, I will also be doing a sort of introductory lecture, mostly because I'm not talking about the material so much. In future lectures, I will have a separate video where it's just me talking about the material by myself without any students, and then a separate video that's an online Hangout like this, full of students asking questions and engaging the material. On this first video, since it's the first day of class and you guys haven't really read any of the material, it's going to be just sort of introduction, answering these questions and getting everyone oriented. Yeah. Last semester, I had people fill out online forms in a different way to do attendance. So this way is supposed to be easier for me, but it's a little rocky setting it up. That's okay. Let's go ahead and end. There's no video lecture today. I'm going to do the video lecture. I'm about to jump into the video lecture right now for lesson 1. So this video will constitute the lesson 1 lecture. Let's go ahead and do that now then. Good. So okay. So lesson 1, engineering social systems. So this is an engineering ethics course. A lot of students don't really know what to expect from an engineering ethics course, or from a philosophy course generally. Especially engineers who spend most of their time doing physics and math, sort of hard science. A primarily writing-based course like this can sometimes make people nervous. In quiz 1, if you load quiz 1, so someone just asked, I can't see the 2 questions for the secret word. If you go back to the to Moodle in attendance number 1, yeah, attendance number 1 in lesson 1. Oh, sorry, the second question is over here on the side. This should actually be set up so that all the questions are on one page. Sorry. Appearance layout. Every question on one page. That should work now. Yeah, you should see both questions on a single page. What is the lecture secret word? Okay, good. Okay, so if you took the quiz before the update, I deleted your quiz, so you should be able to take it now. Yeah, so you should be able to take it now. Just refresh, hit F5. People having problems with the quiz. Let me go back here. Oh, I'm on a different lesson, sorry. I forgot there are 4 students, 3 classes here. Give me just 1 second. Oh, this is gonna actually take a second. The 2 online words will be exactly the same. When class is over, I'll rearrange the other 2 quizzes to allow for the secret words. So just write down secret word. Online Hangout secret word is online. So write that down. When I'm done with the lecture, the first thing I'll do will be to change those quizzes around so you can redo those quizzes. I'm sorry about that. I just probably shouldn't be doing this live anymore to bother people. Let me just jump into the lesson. Let me jump to the lecture to get to the meat of today's topic. Let me get this out of the way. All right. Ethics and engineering. Most students don't know what to do with ethics and engineering. In particular, most students walk in, so there's 2 basic things. Yeah, if you need to come and go, that's fine. You got the secret word, so you know how to answer it. Good. Have a good day. Okay. There's 2 general things that students tend to think, engineering students tend to think about when they think about ethics. One thing they think about is just the difference between right and wrong. And most students coming into this class think, well, I know the difference between right and wrong. And I know that wrong things are bad and the right things are good. And you should do the right things, not the wrong things. And they teach you that in kindergarten, and you are all, adults. So these kinds of lessons seem tedious and rather condescending. Most people come into this class thinking that if it's just about what the difference between right and wrong is, I know that already. I don't need anyone lecturing to me about that. So they tend to think the class is pretty useless. That's one thing people think. Another thing people think, especially if you had a little more job experience, is that most jobs that you have, especially government jobs, tend to have mandated ethics training at the beginning. So I work for the New Jersey Institute of Technology. It's New Jersey State University. So to become an employee, I have to take the New Jersey mandated state ethics exam. And this ethics exam, or ethics training, it's an online module, which is basically just a PowerPoint presentation, where I have to sort of click through the PowerPoint presentation. It shows me a couple of scenarios, what the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do is, what sexual harassment is and so on, or what bribery is, what whistleblowing is. And it's very sort of simple PowerPoint presentation. that you go through. At the very end, there's a little multiple choice question to make sure that you actually read the material, and then that's the training. Everyone in the state who's a state employee has to take that training. It's kind of a joke. There's not a whole lot of, I mean, the material in it is good, but the presentation is not very engaging, and the test at the end is not very serious, and the whole thing doesn't seem like it's taking ethics very seriously, especially when the state of New Jersey is headed by someone who's in flagrant violation of a lot of the ethical policies of the state. It gives you very little motivation to sort of follow along. So I want to make it clear to begin with that this class, first of all, it's not about teaching you the difference between right and wrong. I assume that you're all adults and you already know the difference between right and wrong. And if you and I disagree about where those boundaries lie, I don't think it's my job to change your mind. It's not my job to make you a better person, although I hope you want to be a better person. Nothing that I'm going to say is going to change your mind about how much you want to be a good person. I assume that you have some interest in doing the right things and not the wrong things. For instance, I assume that you don't want to murder people unnecessarily. Maybe some people do, but most people don't. And because it would be bad, murdering people unnecessarily. So I'm not going to try to convince you not to murder people unnecessarily. I assume you already have some desire to do that. And this course is not going to be just another sort of state-mandated ethics training course, right? The point is not just to teach you the policies for whatever institution you're working with. It's not just to teach you the particular laws governing your career or your profession. Instead, this class is designed to give you some space for thinking about this while it sort of doesn't matter. So we're going to be talking about a lot of serious cases of ethical consideration where people's lives are on the line. In a lot of the cases that we'll talk about, people die. And in preventable disasters that could have been stopped if someone had taken the appropriate precautions ahead of time. That doesn't mean the people who made these mistakes were evil or bad or ethically corrupt or anything like that. Some of them are. We'll talk about cases of corruption a little bit, but most of these people just made a mistake or weren't thinking carefully or weren't following the procedures on the books. And then we see the consequences of these actions. The point here is not to tell you that the consequences are bad. You already know the consequences are bad. The point here is to let you think about why those procedures are important, why the rules are important, and how your own value system and how you would react in these situations yourself. And the idea is to think about it now while we're in the luxury of a college course and no one's lives are on the line, right? And there's no career pressure to get ahead or to please your boss. So that you can actually think about these things critically and examine them carefully. Having the opportunity to spend 15 weeks studying philosophy, it's a great privilege. It's the kind of opportunity that most people don't have, and most of you will never have again. Like, when else in your life will you have 15 weeks where your job is literally to sit there and think about philosophical issues and ethics? This is something that you might never have a chance to do again, but it might matter in the future, right? You might have a job where the decisions you make are life or death decisions, and in the moment when you're making the life or death decision is not the best time to start contemplating philosophy. Right? The idea is that you want to contemplate philosophy when you have the opportunity to right now, when there's very little risk, and there's not a whole lot that rests on how you decide. Your grade in the class is entirely going to rest on how much work you put into the course, not the conclusions you draw from it, not how much I agree with your conclusions, but how much it's clear how much effort you put into your work and how that effort is reflected in the quality of your work. Even if you completely disagree with me, if you give a good case, if you make a good argument, if you give a clear presentation of your perspective, that's what's going to get you a good grade in the class. So please take that opportunity. Please don't wait until you're on the job and needing to make a life or death decision before you start thinking about what ethics really means or what your values really are. I mean, you might know the difference between right and wrong, but you might not always know you might not always know how you're going to decide in particular cases. Values are complicated things. Social norms are complicated, very complicated things, and thinking them through is hard. And often the conflicts are not just between right and wrong, but between one thing I want and another thing I also want. Right? And how do I decide between these two things that I want, especially when there's lives on the line? Right? These are the kinds of questions that are difficult to answer, and they require some consideration ahead of time. So that's what this course is about. This course is giving you the chance to think about your own values, your own perspective, to throw them up against a bunch of real historical cases where decisions matter, so you can reflect on what happened then and what the consequences were in that situation and how you might do otherwise. So really take the time to introspect, think about your own perspective, think about your own values. If you have work experience that has informed your values, or if you have other experience that's informed your values, share it with the group. Let us know where you're coming from and how you're thinking about these issues, so we can evaluate the case for ourselves. Right. So not only should you be thinking about your own values, but really take the chance to think about other people's values, especially where they disagree. In these discussion-based forums where you have to respond to other people, it's very common for students to find people that they agree with and then just say, hey, I agree with you. That's exactly how I think. That's fine. If you do that, that meets the minimum requirements for the course. But it's also the path of least resistance. Right? Agreement is easy. Agreement is what helps people get along. But sometimes disagreement or criticism or more careful analysis, it's not just agreement, but nuanced distinctions. Right? These are the kind of things that are a little bit harder, a little bit less socially pleasant, but they can help us gain better insight into what's going on. I don't want you to be mean on the forums. Be respectful. This is a class environment. Don't attack people. Don't make people feel bad for who they are. The discussion forum, it's really about everyone feeling encouraged to express their own views, share their own thoughts, and comment on each other's thoughts. And that requires that everyone is coming to the discussion with a mind of being respectful and appreciating that everyone has their own perspectives. And what we want to do is we want to see what happens when these perspectives all run into each other and talk about some of this. Some of this material is going to be controversial. Some of this material, you will see my own political and ethical biases coming through in some of the presentation. And if you disagree, I hope you do disagree, let me know why. Show what other perspectives are on the table to talk about this stuff. Yeah, that's my introduction. The rest of the lesson here, and this is how these lectures will typically go, the rest of the lesson here is introducing the particular material in the reading. So I actually have a slideshow over here that I will share. Yeah, Engineering Social Systems, Lesson 1. If people have questions or comments, go ahead and interrupt or leave a question in the chat. So for Lesson 1, again, this is an introductory lesson. It's just getting you starting to think about what is the relationship between engineering as a profession, as a discipline, right? The methods and standards of engineering, the professional practices, the professional bodies, the regulatory bodies that oversee engineering, all that kind of stuff. Between all of that and ethics, values, cultural norms, our standards for right and wrong, good and bad. Right? The premise of this whole course is that these two things have a deep relationship to each other, ethics and engineering. But especially for engineers, sometimes this relationship is a little bit hard to tease out. And so this first lesson is just an introductory lesson to get you to start thinking about this relationship. The next couple of lessons, we'll dive into it more deeply, and then we get into specific issues. But right now, just sort of think about it as brainstorming. How are ethics and values related to engineering? In Moodle, I frame this in the following way. I ask the following questions. How do engineering projects reflect the values, assumptions, and interests of their designers or of the broader society that they're in? Right, so think about any particular engineering project, a bridge, a road or whatever, a wall on the Mexican border. Right, so how do these engineering project. These are big engineering projects, big feats of human coordination, labor, resources. Right, how do these things get built in such a way to reflect the values of their designers, the assumptions of their designers, how their designers see the world, how their builders see the world, how the engineers who built them see the world? And how do the engineering projects, how do the values that inform an engineering project, how might those values conflict with other values that we have, or intersect with other values that we have? How do they overlap with the other values that we have? Or what is the relationship between the values that inform a particular engineering project and all the other values in society that intersect with it? So again, these are very, very broad questions. There's lots that you might want to say about it. The material that I've suggested for this lesson are trying to give you different entry points into this very general question. We'll get more specific as the semester goes on. But just at this very, very abstract level, the first thing to say is from our textbook. Textbook from page 88 to 100. Let me show you. Here's the textbook. Page 88 to 100 goes over the textbook's approach to the question of ethics in engineering. The textbook takes, I guess I'll say, interesting approach. I'm not sure I like this approach very much. The book itself is okay. This is one of the parts that I'm less comfortable with. So you might want to critique this also. But the book approaches the question of engineering and ethics in terms of thinking about engineering as a kind of experiment. Experiment like a scientific experiment. So a scientific experiment is designed to show that something is or isn't the case, right? To prove some thesis, or validate some hypothesis. And in science, you run an experiment to test the hypothesis out. The experiment is supposed to show that either the hypothesis is true or it's been confirmed or disconfirmed. And the textbook says, well, look, engineering is kind of like an experiment. Because look, engineering projects are sometimes carried out in partial ignorance. You don't always know all the details, all the facts, especially when you start an engineering project. We'll go over some cases where the original architect and engineer made assumptions that ended up turning out wrong and caused a lot of damage. So sometimes you don't know how these engineering projects will turn out, right? The outcomes might be uncertain. And the thing that makes it like science is not just that you try things, but in engineering projects, you learn from your mistakes, right? You see what worked and what didn't, and you use what you learn to improve the next attempt. Right? So this process of making an attempt, finding out what happened, and then using that to inform the next attempt is supposed to mirror, according to the book, the scientific method, right? Where you don't always know everything, but you try something and see how it turns out, and then you use what you learn from that result the next time. So the book says engineering is a little bit like experimentation, and this informs the values of engineering. Know as much as you can. Make sure you actually monitor results and learn from them, improve from what you've done before. Right? These are some of the values at the core of engineering. But the authors of the textbook also note that there's some problems with this. In particular, in science, there's a big stigma against experimenting on human beings. You run scientific experiments, but if you experiment on human beings, psychology experiments where you're testing reaction times or whatever, human experiments have much higher ethical standards. You're not allowed to simply experiment on people just because you can. If you experiment on human subjects, you have to have what scientists call informed consent. It means that they know you're experimenting on them and they agree to that experimentation. And the thing that they agree to really is what you're experimenting on, right? So you have to inform them fully. You can't deceive them about what you're doing. In science, when you run an experiment that involves human subjects, you have to obtain informed consent. You have to use things like a control to make sure that you know what's going on. Right, so these are restrictions on how experiments are conducted in science, but these restrictions don't hold in engineering, right? There's no informed consent for the people who use a bridge. Right? If I drive on a bridge, I just assume that the engineers knew what they were doing when they built it, that the laws governing how they can build the bridge made sure that it was safe. And so when I drive it, I just drive on it without even a second thought. I don't have to sign away. I know that this is how they built the bridge, and I agree to the terms and conditions. In other words, another way of putting this is that engineers are experimenting with humans in a way that may even risk their lives, and often it's the case that the people don't know that they're being experimented on. The general public usually isn't informed about the details of a scientific project, wouldn't understand it even if you gave them the details, and so they're not in a position to assess the reliability of these engineering projects themselves. This puts an incredible ethical weight on the engineers to make sure that their products are safe to be used by the public, especially since the public usually isn't giving their informed consent. That puts an even higher obligation on the engineers to do right by the public, to not violate the public's trust, and to make sure that they're operating in full interests of the public safety. Maybe one way of making this clear is the second source that I have in the required sources. This is also from the textbook, but this is a quote from President Hoover back in the early 20th century. Hoover himself was an engineer, was a professional engineer as his career, and then he moved into politics. He gave at one point a speech on engineering where he talks about the virtues of the engineer and how great of a profession engineering is. But in addition to how great a profession it is, he also talks about what he calls the great liability of the engineer. So I'm going to go and read this quote. Hoover says, "The great liability of the engineer, compared to men of other professions, is that his works are out in the open where all can see them. His acts, step by step, are hard in substance. He cannot bury his mistake in the grave, like the doctors. He cannot argue them into thin air or blame the judge like the lawyers. He cannot, like the architect, cover his failures with trees and vines. He cannot, like the politician, screen his shortcomings by blaming his opponents and hope that the people will forget. The engineer simply cannot deny that he did it. If his works do not work, he is damned." Let me see if anyone has any thoughts about this question. See if people are paying attention, if anyone has any responses. Do you agree with Hoover? What does Hoover mean here by the great liability of the engineer? Does anyone have any thoughts?
So I think it's interesting how he says that, the engineer is held to like a higher standard, I guess, than other professions would be held at. And that even like comparing them to doctors, like if a doctor messes up, I guess the person dies and he can't really be held accountable to that much of an extent. But when an engineer's design fails or his, system doesn't work properly, then there's a lot, riding on that. There could be an entire company riding on that system, on that design. So I guess it really does make sense that, the engineer is held to a different standard than other professions would be.
Yeah, that's great. Held to a higher standard, and it's interesting. It's not just it's held to a higher standard even than other professionals, right? Even than doctors and lawyers. And I think part of what's going on here is that it's the kind of technical knowledge that engineers have. People expect the designs to work. People understand that sometimes doctors can't help a patient, that everyone's going to die eventually. Right? People understand that sometimes the legal system might be corrupt and politicians might be corrupt. But Hoover's in some sense saying that people have less tolerance for faulty designs in the engineering world, especially because then they know who to blame. Look, the engineer's name, the design's written right there on it. So, so there's someone to blame. So he's not necessarily saying that engineering is more important than doctors, but just that the standards for professional operation are much higher. Amaka says if a person dies, there's lawsuits and stuff like that. So I feel like we're held to the same standards as other professions. Yeah, I mean that's true. Doctors can be sued for malpractice. There are definitely professional standards. In fact, maybe I should say this now. Engineering ethics is one of maybe three, maybe four major professional ethics classes that universities usually teach. The three are engineering ethics, biomedical ethics for future doctors, and business ethics for future businessmen. So the biomedical ethics of doctors, it has a lot to do with things like patients' rights, malpractice, liability, that kind of stuff. Business ethics has a lot to do with bribery and corruption, false advertising, false presentation, that kind of stuff. Business corruption sort of issues. And engineering ethics really has to do with the safety of designs, how much emphasis is being put on safety versus other issues like cost. And we'll see in this class, it's often the case that cost, usually in terms of money or time, is given more weight than safety, and consequences of that tension. We'll see how those come out. Other thoughts about the great liability of the engineer. So we've had some people agree with Hoover, and some people say that maybe all professions are held to a high standard. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll go ahead and move on. So Hoover is talking about engineering as a profession being held to a higher standard. Yeah, there's a secret word for lesson one. So remember that there will be, at the end of this lesson, I'm going to go in to the quizzes, and there will be a quiz question for the online section and a quiz question for the Hangout, for the lecture and for the Hangout. For the online Hangout will be the word online, and for the lecture it'll be the word late. Okay. So one of the other readings, if you want to go into this a little bit more deeply, one of the other readings is this reading called "Do Artifacts Have Politics?" By a guy named Langdon Winner. This is Robert Moses. Do artifacts have politics? Most people are going to answer that question. No, artifacts aren't conscious, persons. Obviously, they don't have politics. We'll talk about AI later on in the semester, but most artifacts, bridges don't have politics, right? People have politics. Well, Langdon Winner wants to challenge this a little bit. Langdon Winner wants to say that yes, artifacts have politics, and they have politics by their very design. And the difficult thing about artifacts is that first of all, because they're not people, it's sometimes hard to see their politics. But even more importantly, artifacts build their politics into infrastructure, into concrete and steel. And that's the kind of stuff that doesn't go away easy, right? So if I build roads with some political intentions, those roads will still be there in 50 years. Maybe they'll still be there in 100 years. In which case my political intentions 100 years ago get carried on into the future. The best example of this, and Langdon Winner talks about this in some detail, is Robert Moses. So Robert Moses was one of the master city planners of New York City from the 20s until the 70s. So for the big chunk of the 20th century, all throughout the war years, I'm sure you've all been to Manhattan. Manhattan has highways along both coasts of the island. All that beautiful real estate, and there's these massive 4-lane highways going down both sides. Robert Moses was the guy who planned that out. So you can blame Robert Moses for that idea. Not only the highways in Manhattan, but in fact all across the city, and in particular in Brooklyn. So one of the things that Robert Moses decided back in the early part of the 20th century was that Manhattan was going to be the place for rich people, and that we wanted to keep as many poor people and minority people out of Manhattan as possible. So when Robert Moses built the bridges going into Brooklyn and Long Island, he built the overpasses to be artificially low. He built artificially low overpasses on the highways so that the buses couldn't go on the highways. And the idea was that if you're from the poor outskirts of the city and you want to get into the city, you're going to be taking public transportation. So Robert Moses just made it very, very difficult for anyone who's stuck on public transportation to come into the city. Robert Moses had explicitly racist intentions in doing this, racist and classist intentions. Right? He wanted the comfortable automobile-owning middle class to have access to the city while keeping out the undesirable public transit using minorities. If you know anything about urban design, if you're an architect or urban design major, Robert Moses is one of these people that everyone in the profession loves to hate. He's an awful person, but I mean, the point here is not just that he was a bad guy and he made bad decisions. It's that the decisions that he made had infrastructural consequences that we still live with today. Right? So his prejudices 50 years ago, 100 years ago, have implications for the world we live in right now. He's no longer around, but all the stuff he built is still around, and we all have to live with it. So this is what Langdon Winter means when he says artifacts have politics. Artifacts bake the politics of their users right into their very structure. I have a little quote here. This is a longish quote, but I like it. So this is from the Langdon Winter article. These things we call technologies are ways of building order into our world. Many technical devices and systems important in everyday life contain possibilities for many different ways of ordering human activity. Consciously or not, deliberately or inadvertently, societies choose to structure these technologies. Choose structures for technologies that influence how people are going to work, communicate, travel, consume, and so forth for a very long time. In the process by which structuring decisions are made, different people are differently situated and possess unequal degrees of power as well as unequal levels of awareness. By far, the greatest latitude of choice exists the very first time a particular instrument, system, or technique is introduced. Because choices tend to become strongly fixed in material equipment, economic investment, and social habit, the original flexibility vanishes for all practical purposes once the initial communities are made, or commitments are made. In that sense, technological innovations are similar to legislative acts or public foundings that establish a framework for public order that will endure over many generations. For that reason, the same careful attention that one would give to rules, roles, and relationships of politics must also be given to things such as buildings of highways, the creation of television networks, and the tailoring of seemingly insignificant features on new machines. The issues that divide or unite people in society are settled not only by the institutions and practices of politics proper, but also, less obviously, in the tangible arrangements of steel and concrete, wire and transistors, nuts and bolts. Langdon Winter's point here is that every one of those bolts matters in a political way to how society arranges itself, to how society organizes itself, to the political decisions of society. So every nut and bolt on that bridge has political implications. It's a decision made from a position of politics, and it has consequences for that political structure. Maybe one way of soliciting questions for this is referencing someone or a group that denies this claim explicitly to artifacts of politics. The thing I'm thinking about is the NRA slogan. So NRA, the National Rifle Association, has a slogan, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Guns don't kill people, right? The gun is just a tool. Tools don't do anything on their own, the NRA says. It's not the tool that kills people, it's people who pull the trigger, or people who take that gun and aim at someone else and pull the trigger, and it's that person who did that act that's really responsible for what that gun does. The idea is that the gun is neutral, the NRA says. The gun is neutral, the gun doesn't do anything on its own. It's people that do things. It's people who have politics, it's people who kill people. This is the NRA slogan. A lot of people think this is very intuitive. But in some sense, Langdon Winter is saying this is wrong. No, in fact, it's not just the people that have politics, it's the gun also. I usually do this example when I'm in a classroom with a bunch of people. I don't have a gun, I don't carry guns around. But if I'm in a classroom and I were to take out a gun, even if I weren't to point it at anyone, just put it on the table, it would change the classroom environment, right? It would make everything tense. People would get maybe nervous. It would, charge the environment in a way. Just having that object there in the room. I mean, first of all, that object isn't supposed to be in that room, right? It's a classroom. It's not a place where guns are supposed to be. So bringing that object out, even if you don't use it, just having that gun there has a charge on the ethical and political situation. Right? This is part of Winter's point. It's not just the person who uses the gun. The gun itself, as an object, as a piece of metal has political implications. Not that it's good or bad, but that it's a sort of an active political artifact. It's a live artifact in the sense that it has direct and immediate consequences for the political situation. Just that object being there, just that lump of steel being there. Okay, this is starting to get a little bit more controversial. Maybe you have a little more things to say. Let me open it up one more time. I'm almost done with the lesson, but let me open it one more time to comments if anyone has any thoughts or comments. We still got 20 participants in the chat, but maybe you all have me on mute and aren't listening. No thoughts, comments? Yeah, I just muted my mic to see if anyone else wants to talk. Thoughts, comments? No.
Okay, so I just want to make sure of something. So when you're drawing the parallel between what the NRA says, how a tool is valued, do you compare that directly to how a bridge would be valued or a building would be valued?
Yeah, right. So imagine the analog of the NRA statement. Bridges don't have politics; people have politics. Right? It's not the bridge that's a political artifact. It's the people that use the bridge as a political artifact. And so Langdon Winter is in some sense disagreeing. Is saying no, it's not just the person; it's also that the bridge, right? That artifact, the concrete and steel itself, simply being there and structured the way it is, has consequences for the way that people use it, for the way that people, for the values that people have. Because that bridge is there, it's a lot easier for me to get from Manhattan to Brooklyn. If that bridge wasn't there, then it'd be a much more difficult time, and communities would be separate. Right? So putting that bridge there has political implications for the societies.
Right. So the same way you putting the gun on the table would have some other implication, right? Okay.
Right. Even if I'm not using it in any particular way, just it being there itself. Just the artifact itself. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm not saying that guns are bad. I'm just saying that the artifacts themselves have politics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I could see how they would influence something like a decision, or they would influence the general, atmosphere of the society at the time, because based on how, a group of people can move from one place to another, then, society would develop in accordance to that, and they would become used to, seeing a certain kind of people in this area, seeing, more, this more kind, a more specific type of spending or specific activities in certain areas than others. Right. Okay. Right, and the infrastructure that we build makes all that possible. So, just for instance, right now there's a lot of talk. Last year we had that Hoboken crash, the train crash, and there's been a lot of talk for the last few years about the public transportation system in the United States, the rail system. We don't really have a great cross-country railroad system. Most people fly across country and they don't take the trains. But if we had a high-speed railroad, maybe that would change. It would change the way that people look at travel. It change their traveling opportunities. Maybe it would change the energy. Right, flying in planes is really bad for the environment. Maybe an electric train system would be a lot better for the environment. Right, these are political consequences of these decisions. Right, building that train is not a neutral act. It's a politically charged act. Right. Could be good or bad, but the point is that it has these consequences for the politics. Maybe I should say politics here in the sense of the root word polis. Polis, P-O-L-I-S, is from the Greek. Greek polis is like a city. So like Indianapolis is a city in Indiana. Polis is a city. So the politics is all the stuff that's required to manage the city, all the stuff that's required to manage social life,
and all the different relationships that we have in social life, economic relationships, cultural relationships. Right? All of those things have to be managed by the polis. And what Winner is saying is that managing the polis is partly a matter of managing our technologies, the things that we build to help structure the polis. So building these bridges, building these large engineering projects is how we organize and manage the polis, the city. And so it has consequences for what we do in those cities. It has political consequences.
Right. Okay.
Good. So I think there's just one more bit on the required readings that I'm going to share. This is another quote. I really like this quote, though. This is one of those quotes that makes me sort of tear up. This is from Norbert Wiener, who's he's a cyberneticist, a mathematician at MIT back in the 50s. One of my science heroes. And this is him reflecting on this issue of the structure we make for society. He says, and this is very abstract sort of philosophical thinking. He says, we're swimming upstream against a great torrent of disorganization, which tends to reduce everything to the heat death of equilibrium and sameness described in the second law of thermodynamics. What Maxwell, Boltzmann, and Gibbs meant by the heat death in physics has its counterpart in the ethics of Kierkegaard, who points out that we live in a chaotic moral universe. In this, our main obligation is to establish arbitrary enclaves of order and system. These enclaves will not remain there indefinitely by any momentum of their own after we've once established them. Like the Red Queen, we cannot stay where we are without running as fast as we can. We are not fighting for a definite victory into the indefinite future. It is the greatest possible victory to be, to continue to be, to have been. No defeat can deprive us of the success of having existed for some moment in time in a universe that seems indifferent to us. This is no defeatism. It is rather a sense of tragedy in a world in which necessity is represented by the inevitable disappearance of differentiation. The declaration of our own nature and the attempt to build an enclave of organization in the face of nature's overwhelming tendency to disorder is an insolence against the gods and the iron necessity they impose. Here lies tragedy, but here lies glory too. I like this quote for framing the engineering ethics class, because I guess this is my sense of what we're doing when we're making these big engineering projects. We're establishing arbitrary enclaves of order and system, organizations, orders that will only stay there as long as we're willing to put them there and keep them there. And the tendency in nature is to erode everything. Entropy, second law of thermodynamics, brings everything to the sameness and equilibrium, to noise, to no signal. And our attempt to build engineering projects is an attempt to establish the signal in the face of the noise, to build an arbitrary enclave of order and system, even while the rest of nature tries to tear it apart. So these engineering projects are, right? I mean, they have capacity for great tragedy, but they also have capacity for great glory too, right? Some of the things that we're most proudest of in human history are the things that we've built, right? The pyramids, the great engineering projects that last long after the people who built them are around, long after the ethics of the people that built them still hold sway over the people. So try to think about your career as an engineer from this very big perspective. What are you doing for society? What future are you building for society? What values do your projects express? What implications does it have for how everyone else does everything else they're doing? This is as big and abstract as these questions, right? This is you're sort of getting your toes wet in philosophy. As we go through the semester, we will narrow these issues down into very specific kinds of questions, very specific case studies. But for now, take some time to do some very abstract philosophy. I do have lots of other resources on Moodle, especially with regard to this discussion of arbitrary enclaves of order. I give a talk by Steven Strogatz, who's a physicist, who talks about synchronization and how systems sort of tend to sync up with each other. You may have seen this before, but these are a bunch of metronomes that are all on a wobbling table. You start them all randomly, so they all wobble randomly, but because they're all synchronized on this table, and the table's slightly shifting under the weight of each one of the tick-tocks of the metronome, then as you watch this video go on, you'll see that more and more of these metronomes come into sync just by themselves. And they come into sync because they share an underlying medium. Right? It's that table, that wobbling table, that brings all the metronomes into sync, even though they all started off disconnected. Right? So it's this shared infrastructure that unites and coordinates all the things. This is true for the metronomes on the table, but it's true for other kinds of systems. And Strogatz talks about how this is kind of a rule of nature. And so some of the other examples I give are just thinking about how what individual systems do within the shared infrastructure might have implications for the rest of the people. So one thing I talk about, one video I give, is this discussion. There's a BBC documentary on the Millennium Bridge. In the year 2000, in London, they built this bridge across the Thames River. It's called the Millennium Bridge. It's open in 2000, supposed to be a celebration of the millennium. Turns out, didn't work so well. So just like the metronomes, the bridge was built in a way that allowed it to wobble a little bit in the wind. This was on purpose so that it would have a little bit of give and wouldn't just snap, it wouldn't be brittle. So the bridge could wobble a little bit, but during the opening ceremony, when they had thousands and thousands of people on the bridge, and all the people are walking back and forth with their legs, the synchronization of all the people started to make the whole bridge sway. And once the whole bridge started swaying, then people started rocking back and forth. When they were walking on it, they had to sort of wobble in order to walk on it. There's little discussions of people who were on the bridge at the time. Let me see if I can. Yeah, it'll show these people sort of wobbling back and forth. How they had to walk side to side in order to stay upright on the bridge. And the thing is that because so the bridge was wobbling a little bit and everyone had to walk side to stay upright on the bridge, and that reinforced the wobbling more. And so the bridge ended up wobbling by like 5 or 6 inches on each side. And people got scared. They ended up shutting the Millennium Bridge down and didn't open for another couple of years when they had to redo the designs. Right? The people didn't go on the bridge with the intention of making it wobble to the point of unsafety. But because of the way the infrastructure worked, everyone's behavior ended up coordinated on it anyway, whether they wanted to or not. And this created a big safety hazard. So the bridge has been repaired now. It's open again. It doesn't wobble as much anymore. But this was sort of it's a good reminder of how even modern day engineering, right? This is the year 2000. This isn't the Stone Age. The engineering techniques were really sophisticated, but even still, they weren't able to anticipate the coordinated results of human behavior, and it created dangerous situations as a result. So these are examples to get you thinking about, about the relationship between these technologies and human social systems. I give the Millennium Bridge. I'll just point out the other 2 examples. One example here is from Lauren Carpenter. It's going very slowly. It's not working very well. One is from Lauren Carpenter, where he plays a Pong game with a group of people where they're all collectively playing Pong. And he did this experiment in the 90s with a bunch of people collectively playing Pong. It was kind of a big deal in the 90s. It's less of a big deal now because nowadays we have Twitch Plays. If you remember Twitch Plays Pokemon, where we have big groups of collective people all using the same infrastructure to accomplish some coordinated task. The capacities of the internet to do these coordinated tasks is sort of novel. We're just only within the last couple of years we're starting to recognize the kind of consequences of these sort of mass collective actions. Pokemon Go game. Also on the website, I linked to the parable of the polygons, where it talks about this kind of coordination effort, not on bridges or in video games, but in the real world, and especially in racial segregation. How even if everyone's not racist, if they participate in in a social environment that has a slight tendency towards racism, you end up getting these emergent effects where people behave really racist even though they don't want to. So the parallel polygons is a good way of exploring the social dimensions of this, sort of engineering dimensions, gaming culture. These are various case studies for this more general discussion of what is engineering as a profession, how does engineering as a profession relate to the values that go into the projects that they build. What are these arbitrary enclaves of order that we're building? All right, so that's lesson 1. I rambled maybe too much than I should, but let me go ahead and see if there are any last questions about the class, about the assignment structure. I'm about to hang up and then go repair those quizzes. And so students in 456 and 454 should go fill in the attendance quiz for lesson 1 in about 10 minutes when I finish repairing that. But otherwise, are there any questions, comments, concerns about the class structure, about what we're doing here?
It seems pretty clear so far.
Good, thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, if any questions. Oh, I was emailing you for the future quizzes. We're required to do all the readings, correct? We're required to do all the required readings?
So you're required to look at the required readings well enough to take the quiz.
Okay.
So the quiz is only on the required readings. It won't touch any of the optional readings. And you just have to read the required readings well enough to take the quiz. There's no time limit on the quiz, so you can have the quiz open as you're doing the readings, and every time you get a question answered, you can just answer the question.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I was thinking that when we make our post, or if we're going to reply to a post, that's when we focus strongly on the required reading to, cover as much concept as we can.
Right. And I would recommend you against focusing on all of the required readings and even go more specific than that and just focus on 1 or maybe 2 of the required readings and go in depth as you can.
Because like you mentioned that it's too much for you to just, acquire it as much, look at it from different viewpoints for all the readings.
Yeah, that's right. So the way I'm thinking about it is, read the introduction, look at all the readings to get a sense of what's going on in the lesson.
Correct.
And then do the quiz, and then focus on one thing that you really want to talk about in your post.
Nice. And even the video lecture that you put up, you even do a little brief introduction to the required readings as well, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah, so this video was partially lecture on the material and partially introduction to the class. And I just combined those in these 2 videos. Next week and for all future weeks, I'll have a separate lecture and then a separate Hangout. And when we do the Hangout, it'll mostly be discussion based.
Okay, nice.
Other questions?
So you gave us the secret word for the lecture, which was online, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now what's the one for the Hangout?
For the Hangout is, the secret word for the lecture is late.
Oh, for the lecture is late? Okay.
Late. Secret word for lesson 1 lecture is late. Secret word for the Hangout is online.
Online. Okay. And is that capital or?
It doesn't. Case doesn't matter.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. I'm going to go. If you've done quizzes in the other sections, I'm going to delete your quizzes and I'm going to redo the quizzes so you can do them. You should be able to resubmit your quiz with both answers in the next 10 minutes.
Okay.
If anyone has any other questions, send me an email or leave a note in the discussion forums. I'll try to answer the questions. And then I hope to see you guys again next week. Where we'll have some more discussion.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.